All right, so welcome everyone. Again, my name is Ana Pilar, and this is our prenatal adaptations. We'll have 3 hours here to talk about this. We will just go through some of the anatomy, some myths, some adaptations you can use in class. Again, this is not a prenatal certification. This is just for you to learn tools to adapt for prenatal students that come into your class. So a little background, I started teaching about 20 years ago, and I was in my 20s, and when a prenatal person would come in, it was like a slight panic moment, fear, and then like, what do I do? And then, trying to figure out what to do with them. So, and then I ended up having 2 children, and yeah, it's not so scary after that. So one of the biggest things I think, one of the things that I want you to understand is that if a prenatal student walks into your Vinyasa flow class or any sort of flow class, or even like, a regular Hatha class, most likely at this point, this is just generalization, but at this point, I'm pretty sure I could guarantee that they probably practiced yoga before. Like yoga is everywhere now, right? 20 years ago, not so much, but now, I see commercials, I see ads for yogurt, and even like tequila, which is weird, with people in like full scorpion poses and all. Everybody knows what yoga is. So if they're coming to a non-prenatal class, it doesn't say prenatal yoga, it says flow or vinyasa, level 1, whatever, most likely they have a practice. And of course, check in with them, talk to them. They will definitely tell you if they're pregnant, how far along they are, and ask them if they have a regular practice. That being said is because I don't want you to think that they can't do anything and that you have to treat them with kid gloves. When somebody has a practice and then they are pregnant, yes, there is going to be things that they won't be able to do, they should not do. But to be perfectly honest, like the body is designed to protect that baby, and it is pretty quickly and pretty evident when somebody doesn't feel good, they will stop. And again, course, tell them that too, like, please, if anything, stop, whatever hurt. But it's not even a question. There's nothing a doubt because it's an instant, like, nope, not doing that. So one of the biggest myths is that that I find is that, like these prenatal people are so breakable and they can't be on their back and they can't fold forward and they can't be on their belly ever. And so we're going to talk about some of these myths a little bit. So as the student starts to grow in the stages, after the first trimester, definitely things are not happening on the belly. That is for sure. But in those first, I would say, up to 10 to 12 weeks-ish, maybe a little less, depending on the person, people can still be on their belly if they want to be. I was always a belly sleeper, and I waited to the last one before I couldn't do it anymore, before I would have to turn over and be on my side. So when I would practice, I would just put a little extra padding, a blanket underneath the belly. The other thing is about being on your back. And at some point, yes, it'll be more uncomfortable to be on your back as the stages of pregnancy go on. But in the very first few stages, couple months, first trimester, even to the second, you can be on your back. You might not be on there for longer than 3 minutes. It might not be comfortable for longer than 3 minutes as you are in the larger or the later stages. But again, you don't have to be worried about them not being able to do any supine postures. And then the other one is inversions, and this is the hot topic. So we'll wait for that later. We'll talk about exactly about that stuff. All right. So one of my favorite quotes, just to kind of start off just a little bit, is from Ina May Gaskin. She was a midwife, doula, very famous, wrote a lot of books. And she says, there is no other organ quite like the uterus. If men had such an organ, they would brag about it. So we should. So that being said, let's talk about what's happening when you are pregnant. So During pregnancy, all right, when it starts to happen, the pelvis will start to change just a little bit. So what happens, so your pelvis, if you don't remember anatomy, is comprised of 3 parts, okay? And these 3 parts are, they are connected, okay, with ligaments. So you've got the 2 halves, which are the hips, or the ilia, right, and the ischia, right? So the hip is the ilia, and the ischia, the sit bones, right? And these connect with the sacrum posterior. This is the sacroiliac joint, and at the pubic symphysis, which is, you know, at the front, right? So anteriorly, they call it. So the ischial tuberosities, the sit bones, offer a weight-bearing surface. Now, this sacroiliac joint is slightly concave, it's curved, and this allows it for like being a bowl. Now, all the sacroiliac joints, which is where the ilia, the hips, and the ischia connect to the sacrum, okay, these ligaments start to soften a little bit with a hormone called relaxin, okay? So one of the things that's fascinating is that when you get pregnant, a bunch of different hormones get released than normal, that you normally have in your body. Well, they're in your body, but it's like lots of it. So relaxin is one of them, and it's a slow process, but what happens is that relaxin, okay, is it induces ligament laxity, okay? So that way your pelvis can actually broaden and shift to allow the baby to eventually pass through, and it passes through in a spiral way. So this is where we get some destabilization with the pelvis, okay? But this is how we're able to pass a baby through our pelvis, which is amazing. Now, here's the thing I always think, I'm just gonna put this out here just because it's kind of funny. I always think of this interesting. It's like, that is the standard, like male pelvises and female pelvises are slightly different. However, they're still comprised of 3 joints. So what that shows is that this female pelvis is standard. That's the standard. That is the standard. That's the template. And that the male is the aberration, because that's just how it is. So we are the template, get it? Or else males wouldn't have 3 parts to their pelvis, because they weren't going to pass a baby through, right? So why would they have their pelvis in 3 parts? But they do. So think about that for a second. Now, that, or nipples. Yes, I was going to say nipples too. That's true. So someone's like, or nipples. And it's true, because why would they have nipples? They don't have to breastfeed. But yeah, so again, anyway. All right, so there's some other little anatomy here. Okay, so we have that sacrum. Now, the sciatic nerve is a major nerve plexus that exits from the spine, like from the end of the spine, well, right above the sacrum, right? And it passes through the anterior, so it's the front portion of the SI joint. Now, and it goes out of the pelvis through this thing called the sciatic notch. Now, this nerve can be impinged by the SI joint or by the piriformis muscle. So as the fetus grows, as the uterus gets heavier, sometimes there's pressure on that nerve. And also, as the fetus grows, your weight displaces, which also makes the femoral heads, right? So the tops of your femurs that attach in that sit in that hip socket to start to externally rotate. So in later pregnancies, they talk about, the duck walk. It's like a waddle. And that's because of the external rotation. That can also put pressure on that sciatic or femoral nerve, right? So this is some of the things that are like, ooh. Pelvic floor is extremely important, obviously. This is, the pelvic floor muscles are like a hammock, like a sling, right? Bounded by the pubic bone in the front and then the ischial tuberosities, and then laterally and coccyx posteriorly. So these are what holding, it's holding up, right? With the organs and all of that within the pelvic bowl. So one of the biggest things that we have to be aware of is that there's a lot of pressure on that pelvic bowl. So any sort of Kegel or Mula Bandha work, you know, the tone and relax is going to be very helpful. But these eventually start to, again, everything starts to soften so you can pass the baby through. These same sort of toning exercises will help postpartum as well. And then there's these uterine ligaments that are called round ligaments. They're from the sides of the uterus and they attach to the labia. Now, these help keep the uterus in the midline, all right? And so what happens is that as the uterus starts to grow, sometimes there'd be a lot of pain that happens in those round ligaments because there's a lot of pressure that happens with that. So we have to, and that usually sort of is this groin pain that they'll find, or very lower abdominal pain. And then the uterus is what's another thing that's fascinating. So your uterus, ladies, so the uterus usually is about the size of a pear, and kind of shaped a little bit like a pear, and is about, you know, doesn't weigh more than like 2 ounces. It's pretty small. And they say like the capacity is 2 teaspoons. Please please note that when we say the capacity is when, if someone had that's because someone, like when they did an autopsy, they took the uterus, they said, how much water can we fit in here? And it was like 2 teaspoons. That does not mean that you're only bleeding 2 teaspoons of blood during your menstrual cycle, ladies, because I don't know if any of you have heard, like, what are you talking about? Men are like, well, you're only bleeding 2 teaspoons. It's like, no, I am not, because it's the uterine wall. It's different. But it can hold 2 teaspoons, is what it's saying, right? So once it gets, so that by the 3rd trimester, so when the baby is fully ready, right? It is about the size of a watermelon. So it goes from a pear to the size of a watermelon and can take up to, well, they say that you can fill about, how many ounces? It's like crazy. 1 second. Because it's crazy. Let me get the exact. Yeah. So it can approximately hold 1.5 to 2.5 gallons of water. Now, here's the thing. It's holding a baby, which in itself can be anywhere between, you know what I mean, 6 pounds to 8 pounds or more. My 2 kids were 10 pounds, just the baby itself, plus all of the amniotic fluid that surrounds it. So it's an incredible organ because it goes from the little pear to literally this watermelon that can hold a baby and the fluid and the placenta, okay? And then once you birth the baby, it will slowly go back, which is incredible. That's amazing. And then the other thing that the uterus does, which is incredible, is that it grows a whole other organ called the placenta. Sometimes they call it in the mother cake in the midwife and doula circles. And it is literally just created and grown just for pregnancy. And then it is expelled as soon as its function is complete. So that's pretty amazing. It's a filter for the fetus, right? And it provides that circulation, metabolism, exchange of nutrients, all this stuff, right? For the fetus from the mom. So we basically grow another organ and then we get rid of it. It's insane. So I don't know who else can do that. Like, but that's pretty amazing. All right. So with all this stuff combined, it's like, oh my God, she's walking in, she's got all this stuff going on. It does not mean that the practitioner is incapable. So one of the things that happens is as the body starts to slowly shift, it's a little, if it's your first pregnancy especially, it can be a little dissociative. Like it's weird because it's like you think you're the same, but you're really not. And that starts to get more evident as the pregnancy happens, right, as it goes further along. And so there will be, is a process, I always think of, it's a process of slowly basically losing postures, asanas, but then you can regain them later. Do you see what I'm saying? So by the third trimester, you're doing not the same stuff that you were able to do in the first trimester. And that's just normal and natural. And you start to, your body really starts to control your mind a little bit. So it's like you'll get hungry quicker, or you get nauseous. You know what I mean? It's very much like you're really not, like you thought you were in control, but you're really not. And so one of the things I always like when prenatal people come into my class is, just to be kind to themselves, because their body is changing literally every day. Every day it is changing and shifting. And you might feel like you have great balance one day and the next day it's gone, right? So again, just to be kind to themselves and take breaks as much as they need to. That's like the main thing. Now, let's talk about the common discomforts that happen during pregnancy. So one of the biggest things that they talk about or complain about can be, of course, clumsiness or balance issues. Again, the weight displacement starts to be different, as well as the changing of, the relaxin that's happening in the ligaments with their bones. And so that's a big one. And then carpal tunnel, wrist issues is another one, again, due a lot to relaxin. Constipation is a big one. Dizziness with quick level changes. So going like from sitting up to stand, like sitting down to sitting up, or bending over and then coming back up if you pick something up, like that sort of dizziness with the level. Again, this is all about the circulatory, because you get a lot of blood. So let me go back for just a second. So when we think, the blood volume, your blood volume when you're pregnant increases, okay? So it increases about 40 to 50%. So you actually create more blood, all right? And so the reason why the dizziness can happen is that that's a lot more fluid that is having to be regulated with gravity when you're coming up and down. Got it? So we have to be a little bit cautious about up and down, up and down, up and down, especially in the later stages of pregnancy. Again, the digestive system. So again, constipation, nausea, gas. No one likes to hear about that, but yes, gas is another one. Heartburn. Heartburn's a big one, especially as the trimesters go and the fetus grows. It starts to push all of your organs back and up. So again, like the baby is starting to create space for itself, and your stomach and all of that gets pushed up towards your diaphragm, and then your intestines and your bowels are getting pushed down and back, and so things can get a little cramped, shall we say. So heartburn is a big one, and then also constipation. Their senses also, pregnant women's senses get very, very much heightened, especially the sense of smell and taste. Smell is a big one. So one of the things that I never use oils or anything like that in class, just because I know people can be very sensitive anyway, but also if there is a pregnant person in my class, I would not necessarily use any sort of strong scents. It can just trigger. It's just so, and they're like, it could be lavender, it doesn't matter. Like, do you know what I mean? It doesn't have to be an awful smell, it can be anything. So their senses are very, very, very heightened, as well as their sense of touch too. Sometimes they find they get itchy, you know what I mean, etc. So you have to just kind of be aware of all that. Now, before we keep going, questions before any of this sort of anatomy. You're going to get probably more into this with the Ayurveda, but this is sort of like a basic. So any questions, comments? Yes. Detergent, fabric softener. So, you know, you might not be able to be like, well, I have to change the blankets in the class in the studio. No, like people should bring their own blankets. That's fine, especially now. But yes, like detergent smell, even like the touch of stuff can be a little too much. Anybody else have questions? I know. Those of you who guys have had kids, it's like, yep. And it's kind of funny. I love that Nutella. You'd think that Nutella would be a great scent. Nope. Right? Who knows? Like you just don't know. It's one of those things that, you know, and you can, I mean, this is again my experience, but I've talked to enough people, but it's interesting that like the person who I was before kids was a different it's interesting. It's like there's this line that kind of happens. It's like pre-kids and post-kids. And it's like you can't even know what it's going to be like once you have, like after kids, and you can't even tell, like you can't describe it. Like it's when someone's pregnant and you're like, and they think they can still like, I don't know, it's like life will change. Oh, it's not going to change. It's going to like, right, life will change. You're just going to have to accept that. So yes, it's interesting for sure. All right. Oh man.
I have a question.
Yes.
So one of the challenges for me when I was pregnant was I wanted to go to my old studio, but I felt like my teacher could not hold the space for me.
Yes.
And all the other practitioners seemed like, you know, it was a all levels class. But I think that's one of the challenges. And I had to eventually, you know, stop going there and go to a specific prenatal studio, which I just didn't love anyways. So I guess my question is, how do you make sure you're holding space and accommodating? I guess this applies to, you know, not only pregnant people, but just like an all level class in general. But yeah, so
thank you, Lucia. Yes, because honestly, as I said, even in my 20s when I was much younger, and I'm in my late 40s, by the way, just so you know. So 20 years ago, when someone walked in and I was like, you know, 22 teaching a class and someone comes in and they're pregnant, it was like, I don't think I held space that great for them because it was like, oh my God, like that's the first thing. And you don't want to, you already feel weird and uncomfortable, right? Like, right? It's like, things are shifting and weird things are happening to your body. And the last thing you want is someone being like, when they go, you know what I mean? When you're just trying to do some yoga so that you can reduce your anxiety, right? And so one of the big things is the reason why I wanted to teach a little bit here is that don't look at them as like they're an alien, right? That's the first thing. It's like, right? So don't make them feel excluded. So I'm going to give you all these tricks because it's like, one of the things is first make them feel welcome and comfortable, right? And be like, oh, congratulations, awesome. Please hear this. We're going to have you grab a few extra props. Set up wherever you would like to set up. We'll come and check on you. You know what I mean? Like just encourage them to, you know what I mean? Like get props, do what they need. I'm like, and also I always say, if you need to leave to do pee breaks, I'm like, do not worry, just go and come back. Like do shit, like let them, I'm like, if you need your water bottle close, just keep it right by your mat, you know, allow it to be inclusive, right? And the first thing is being like, acknowledging, yeah, it's going to be a little different, no problem. You know, grab extra plops, go to the bathroom whenever you need to, you know what I'm saying, etc. And yes, so this. So, and the other thing is you don't have to change your entire sequence in order to, because they've walked in order to teach them. So if you already have a sequence in mind, especially, right? So if you're like, okay, we're going to be doing, I don't know, full wheel, or let's see, let me think something else. I don't know, let's think of some, maybe something like, Dhanurasana. So like the bow pose, right? Where you're on the belly and you're holding the legs, right? And let's say that's your peak pose for your class. You don't have to change that. What you will tell them, what I always tell them, be like, hey, when we come to the peak pose, it's going to be a pretty intense back bend on the belly. I'm going to have you modify, and I will tell them, just like, you know, I'm going to have you modify. You can do bridge pose on your back with a supported with the block, or you can be on hands and knees and working, you know, the opposite arm and leg, and see if you can like reach back if it feels comfortable. Like, do you see what I'm saying? Like, and then I'm like, but I'll come by when that happens to remind you, and I'll help you with that. So you can adapt, you know what I'm saying, almost anything. Or even give them some, if it's like, okay, my peak pose is a back bend, well then maybe they're in their 3rd trimester, they just really love your class, they won't stop, you know, maybe they should definitely be in a prenatal class at this point, but they're like, no, they're waddling in and they can't even do, I'm like, I'm having them sit down, like do seated back bends where they're on the, like they're sitting, they just bring their hands behind, they just sort of lift their chest, because the idea is like, what was the point of that back bend, right? What is, and it's, does it have to make that shape? No, what we're trying to do is create space in the front, right? So you can easily decide like, let me give you something else, and here's a few choices. So I'll definitely, we'll go through some of that a little bit later. Awesome. Any other questions? Okay, let me see, I'm looking. All right.
That was really helpful. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome, Lucia. I am so sorry that it didn't feel very inclusive. I will say though, guys, you know, I would encourage prenatal students to also go to prenatal classes though, you know, and be like, you don't have to stop coming to my class, but definitely look for a prenatal class if you have friends that teach prenatal or know of a good prenatal studio, because one of the biggest things that prenatal classes do is not necessarily like, it's the, yes, there's a lot of the, you know, physical, like, okay, I'm feeling in my body, but a lot of it's community. And it really allows for community, because this is a space where it was basically, it's only women, weird things are happening. You get to talk about these weird things that maybe you don't want to talk to your partner about. You know what I mean? Like there's a lot of stuff that can be like strange, it's happening. But also, we're also in this society, honestly, we're very isolated. And I think it's even more, it feels more like that now, right? But it's very isolating. Like people aren't necessarily with their extended family that could help them through things, right? And so, you know, it's good to have other people around them that, you know, will, you know, do meal trains, like bring food, like things like that. That's so huge. So definitely encourage them, because they definitely need a little bit of community. All right. So I'm going to go through. So let's just look at some other common discomforts. So we got the carpal tunnel. We have clumsiness and balance issues, constipation, the dizziness with quick level changes. Anxiety can be one, right? Definitely, because this is a new experience for some people, and it can be very anxious. You don't know what's happening. And then fatigue, right? So fatigue is a funny one. You know, there's in the first trimester, fatigue is really bad. And this is because there's a lot of growth happening in that fetus. And that's usually when you don't necessarily are showing or look very pregnant, is when you're literally the most tired. I can remember sitting down and starting to tie my shoe, and I nodded off. Like I literally fell asleep. It was maybe like a minute, and then I was like, oh my God, what am I doing, right? You're that tired. I remember like being like, oh, I'm gonna take a nap at like 3, woke up at like 7 o'clock at night, ate something, and went back to bed at 8 and didn't wake up till the next morning. Do you see? Like it's like that kind of bone tired. And then there's like a burst of energy. They call it like that second trimester. You feel like you're like Wonder Woman. You're like, oh yeah, I can take on the world. And then that only lasts so long. And then you've got the third trimester where you're just, the fatigue is because it's like there's so much weight, like the baby, the fluids, like all that extra blood. And it's just, I think, I mean, again, nature's smart, and it's like, we're going to make this uncomfortable. So you're just not going to worry about that you're going to be pushing a baby out. You're just going to do it because you want it to be over, right? There's a point in the third trimester that you're just like, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I don't want to do this anymore, because it's just, there's a certain point in the second that you're like, this is amazing and I feel incredible. And then third, you're like, nope. So again, it'll be sort of cyclical in that way. So fatigue can be, so even if someone doesn't look like they're very like showing, they could be very, very tired. That's, so just making sure you're good. Headaches can happen again. Again, this is a lot of that like circulation and blood flow and pressure. Heartburn, as I mentioned, with the organs being pushed up. The not so fun ones are like hemorrhoids. Woo, that's always nice. Hip pain, again, when we're looking at that sciatic, right? And hip pain. And then we've got insomnia. Insomnia is a big one. It can be very uncomfortable. Sleep can be very uncomfortable. And so that, of course, adds to the fatigue because they're not getting good sleep. And then another one, because of all this extra blood that you create and fluid that you're creating, is you can get a lot of edema, which is fluid, like it's swelling in the upper and lower extremities of the body. All right, so people's hands can swell up. People's like legs, like the feet and ankles, will swell up. That's a big one that happens. And then leg cramps, so cramping in the lower legs. Backache, so upper and lower back. So let's talk about the reason why. So with lower lumbar, so when you look at third trimester spine, it actually has changed shape. Now, what does that mean? It doesn't like change shape like, oh my God, like it's totally reversed its curves, but no, it literally has increased that lumbar curve. So there's a lot more lordosis that's happening in that lower back. Now, that's due to the weight of the fetus, right? So it's helping displace that, right? So you can carry that fetus. So a lot of compression can happen in that lower lumbar. Now, the upper back is kyphotic, right? So what happens is an increase of kyphosis, and a lot of that is due to the weight of breasts. So breast changes due to the increase of mammary glands being created, milk ducts, right? So the increase of that will start to create this happening, that sort of rounding in the shoulders. Now, unfortunately, that is not going to go away even postpartum. All right, so that is going to be one of the things that you can look at post as well to help, is that hunching because of also breastfeeding, right? So there's that thing. So this poor spine. It's amazing that we literally still can walk and talk after having children. It's pretty incredible. So this is why one of the things like I always loved about prenatal is that even though you don't feel like you are, and some people do feel they're the pregnancy unicorns and they feel amazing, and that's awesome. Bless them. But in my experience, it's just, I never felt like, I felt uncomfortable. I felt heavy. I felt weird. Like I didn't feel like I was glowing and beautiful. But the thing is, it's like, even though that's what's happening on the inside, when you look at it from the outside, it's an incredible thing that you're doing, that your body's able to do and change, and that they are able. So even if you're like, they don't feel particularly beautiful, it's like, I'm always like, it's pretty amazing what you can do. Like, you know what I mean? I'm always encouraging, like, how incredible that their body is able to do this. Because they don't necessarily feel like it. So nasal congestion happens a lot. So like sinus nasal stuff, nausea, of course, is morning sickness. Some people, and it doesn't, this is the thing that I find interesting. It's like, they call it morning sickness, but it doesn't have to happen in the morning. So it can happen all day. and or even in the evening, like, so that nausea can happen. Yeah, so we'll go through the poses for the hunch for the breastfeeding too, don't worry. And then let's see, nosebleeds. Again, this is because of the increase of blood circulation, nosebleeds can happen as well. So don't freak out if all of a sudden, like, they have a slight nosebleed in your class. Like, you know, it's not like, oh my God, they're gonna die. Like, no, just, you know, make sure there's a tissue and make sure that they don't need to freak out, and you don't need to freak out. Let's see, pelvis congestion or heaviness. So this is when people have to kind of wear a little more support in their lower abdominals, right? So they usually use like a belly band or something like that, because there can be a lot of weight and as the baby starts to drop. And so it's a lot of pressure and a lot of heaviness in that lower abdominal area. And then again, they can also get pubic symphysis pain. So that's where, remember we talked about our pelvis and how, you know, in the anterior portion, we've got the pubic symphysis of where like the ilia, you know, and the hip bones, and you've got the ischial tuberosities, which are the sit bones in the back, and then the front is a pubic bone, and this is where they attach, and they actually, you know, have that little ligament between them. That can kind of get wonked out a little bit because of the relaxin. So that's a not fun pain. That's like a sharp pain up your hoo-ha. It's not good. And so that can happen as well. And let's see here, another one. And then round ligament pain. So remember we talked about those ligaments, right? That attach from the uterus to the labia and kind of keep that, keep the uterus to be in the midline. Those can get kind of wonky due to the shifting and growth of the baby. So that'll be a very interesting and not so fun pain. And then we have sciatic, of course, discomfort. That's when that femoral and sciatic nerve start to get pinched. Shortness of breath is another one. So as the baby again is growing and all the organs are being pushed either like up or further down, but definitely creating space for the baby, because all your stomach and all your digestive organs up in that area start getting pushed up, you don't have as much space for the diaphragm. And so it can be a very, it's not, and again, this is because you're also breathing short, then that of course sometimes creates like more anxiety. But there's a point where you're like, sometimes it's like you feel like you're just trying to get air. But yes, so let's see here. Edema with depression of skin retention. Yeah, like the swelling edema. All right, I'm looking at some of the comments and questions. All right, and then of course, varicose veins. Yay, varicose veins. All right, so let's go through. So I'm gonna take, so the most common, so those are like a whole bunch of stuff, right? And I'm like, but let's take some of the most common ones that are gonna be talked about in class. And that would be fatigue, hip pain, insomnia, leg cramps, upper and lower back pain, nausea, that kind of pelvis congestion, that heaviness, and the pubic symphysis pain, round ligament pain, sciatic pain, and the shortness of breath. So we're gonna kind of go through those more common ones, and I'll re-say them right now, but we're gonna go through those, and I'm gonna talk about what asanas help to alleviate some of that. Does that be helpful for everybody? Okay, so let me go through that list again. So again, we went through a lot of them, but the ones that I've found that in class that most people like to talk about, no, very rarely, unless you're in a prenatal class, will someone come up to you and be like, I have hemorrhoids. Like, do you know what I mean? Like, most people are like, I'm not necessarily sharing that, right? So it's like, but they're gonna be like, I'm tired, right? I'm feeling tired. Or, they're gonna say, my right hip is hurt. I have this shooting pain, you know what I mean? Maybe it's a sciatic, or if it's like a hip pain more up high. My legs are cramping up. My low back or my upper back hurt. or, you know, am I feeling a little nauseous today? Or like, I feel very, like there's a lot of pressure and weight, you know, in my lower abdomen, in my lower abdomen, my lower belly. Or they'll say I have a pain in, you know, near my groin, that moves into my lower belly. So again, that would be the round ligament pain, or the pubic symphysis pain, right? So, so let's go through what that is. Okay, so low back pain. So for lower back pain, one nice way to take care of that is Ardha Uttanasana, so a half forward fold. So what does that mean? That means usually that you can put them at the wall, or if you have a chair, they can have their hands or even head and hands supported on the back of that chair, and allow, right, that sort of flat, it's not really a flat, but that kind of flat, more parallel spine, shall we say, toward the floor. And always, of course, have your legs a little bit further, like hip width or wider than hip width apart, depending on the stage of pregnancy. That will help alleviate some of that low back pain. Also, working very gently in cat-cow, or sometimes this is called Marjari Bhitilasana, so cat-cow. So that moving of the spine, right, in a serpentine way, and then also allowing them to explore movement within that. So even like a side-to-side, like sort of a lateral or hip kind of circles in that can be very helpful and freeing for the lower back. Downward facing dog, if they, of course, you know what I mean, are okay with having their head below their heart, will allow for that relief of the lower abdominals. I see that we have a hand raised by Autumn. Do you want to ask your question?
So for instance, cat-cow, would you also recommend that they use a wall or a chair, or that would just depend on their own comfort level?
Well, it depends on if they're having carpal tunnel issues with their wrists, right? But you can do cat-cow. So cat-cow, you know, is on hands and knees. And they can do either, you can fold. So for the carpal tunnel or wrist issues, if there's a lot of pain in there, you can fold your mat. Let me see if I can use a piece of paper here to demonstrate that. You can fold, if you can, like here's your mat, right? You can fold your mat in this kind of way, like a lip, like this. See, and so there is more height, and this is where their palm would go and their fingers would go off. That gives a little bit of a height. But if it's too extreme, then that's even not working. Then they can come on their forearms and they can be on blocks. So 2 blocks underneath their forearms to give them that extra height, and then they can work that cat-cow from there. So again, it's more about the undulation of the spine. Of course, if that doesn't work, they can do that on a chair, you know what I mean, or elevated seated. You can still do the spinal rolls in that way. Now, I have a question here from Mackenzie here. It's about downward facing dog using the wall. Yes, again, you can use a chair or a wall. Basically, that becomes the Ardha Uttanasana, which is, if you look, there's only so many shapes the human body can make. So if you ever notice that Dandasana, staff pose, right? Adho Mukha Svanasana, Ardha Uttanasana, they're all the same shape, right? We just are flipping, right, the foundation. So, down dog is great if they can put their head below their heart. So with the increase in blood flow, sometimes after a certain point, if the head goes below their heart, they'll get a massive headache. And they'll immediately be like, nope, and come out. Do you see what I'm saying? So that's where you're like, okay, great. We're going to use the wall. We're going to make sure your head stays level to your heart. And obviously they would not be doing any other inversions. Do you know what I'm saying? So there's no like inversions then. Again, though, I have to say that doesn't necessarily mean they can't do something like bridge, but you'll have to kind of see how that goes. For me, for example, my first pregnancy, so I'm going to, you know, we all have our own experiences, but I'll just share a little bit of mine so you can kind of get an idea. My first pregnancy, I was macrobiotic. I was, you know, I had a very strong physical asana practice and a pranayama practice. And I was able, like, I was able to stay with my inversion practice up until I believe my 7th month of pregnancy. So way into my 2nd trimester, I could rock Pincha Mayurasana, forearm balance, like nobody's business. Like it was the strongest I've ever felt in that freaking pose. Just the way the weight was, I like, yes. 2nd pregnancy, literally start of my 2nd trimester. Well, the first trimester I felt so fragile and weird. It was weird. I was like, I can't do anything. And then my 2nd trimester, I was like, okay, here comes that Wonder Woman moment. No, I couldn't put my head below my heart. So it was like, nope. And nothing was wrong. I mean, there was nothing wrong with my pregnancy. It's just like that my body for this one was like, never mind. Like, forget it. Good luck. But even though I couldn't put my head below my heart, so I couldn't do downward dog, I couldn't do obviously any headstands or forearm balances, I could do bridge. For some reason, having me on supine and doing a slight inversion was a lot better than it was if I was prone, or, you know what I'm saying, my head was down in a certain way. So again, you just gotta, just kind of see a little bit about that. Hip openers are really good for back pain, lower back pain during pregnancy. So for example, if, malasana, supported, you know what I mean? You can have a block underneath your sit bones. You can be sitting on it if they can't hold it, you know what I mean? Or a blanket underneath their heels. And like something like goddess pose, like that more wide-legged, all of those hip openers help release that lower back for sure. And then let's see here, another one. A good one also is legs up the wall. So, a supported Viparita Karani, if possible, legs up the wall. And then, and sometimes it's cumbersome to get to the wall, you know what I mean? For as you get bigger, it's like, how am I supposed to get my butt and everything to the wall and then my legs up? So using a chair, like you literally just put your calves on the seat of the chair. You see what I'm saying? And you can slide that bolster underneath your sacrum, and it's, you know what I mean, totally it creates that same effect, that kind of waterfall effect is what we're looking at here. So yes, this question, do you find that women on their 2nd or more pregnancy? So yes and no, it depends. Not every pregnancy is the same. Sometimes, people have different issues, more or less. It just depends. I've had people who had terrible, friends of mine who've had terrible first pregnancies, and then their 2nd pregnancy was amazing and actually kind of healed their their trauma from the first. So it literally, I think, and again, this is because we're in yoga here, I think a lot of times it is, it's not necessarily your karma or dharma. It's also the fetus, the child. Do you see what I'm saying? It's interesting, but we have to think about, it's not just about us. It's also about that life that's separate, actually. Right? And so who knows? So yeah. All right, let's keep going here. And Parshva Konasana, so side angle posture is also can be very nice for low back issues, especially if it's like centered on one side or the other, right? You can really kind of get in and alleviate some pressure. And again, all of this stuff, when we're looking at this, so one of the things that you have to remember when we're doing these postures, and I was gonna see if you guys were interested. I was gonna show some stuff too a little bit later. We're gonna do like a little break at like 10:15-ish, but like just for like 10-minute pee break. But I thought when we came back, we can kind of look at and talk about how the postures will look a little bit differently as someone gets larger, right, in their practice. So wider stances, shorter stances, like what kind of props to use, right? So we'll go through that as well. Maybe we'll take a survey and see like what postures you guys are interested in seeing specifically adapted. Because again, I want this to be as interactive as possible for you guys. All right. So for upper back pain, right? And again, this is also good for when people start to breastfeed for postpartum, is the Gomukhasana arms, cow-faced arms. So that's this one that's this way, and you don't have to bind, like you can use a strap, of course, but this sort of, even just variations where you're doing stuff like this, very nice for the upper back pain. Eagle arms as well, Garudasana arms. So this idea, right? And if someone can't, like do that, they can just do something like this. You see what I'm saying? Like, but again, all of that. So in both directions, helping ease the congestion that's happening in the upper back. And then, of course, Purvottanasana, so E-stretch. So we're looking at, and I can't remember the Sanskrit name for it when it's modified, but, Purvottanasana is the E-stretch where you take your hands behind you and you lift your hips up, right? Sort of like a reversed plank, right? It's like plank flipped upside down. Well, you bend your knees and you plant your feet. So, having the hand, this is again, if the wrist issues aren't happening, right? But it's just like lifting that weight up just a little bit, getting all that open. It's very nice. Yeah, cow face saved. I tell you, it is like, yep. It's interesting. You mentioned this, like, I pinched a nerve in my shoulder from co-sleeping. It's hilarious, but I also find that I hurt myself more sleeping or like walking the dog than I ever did in a yoga class or even being pregnant. Like, it's just so funny how life is like that. Like I wake up, I'm like, what did I do? But yeah, so again, these little things, they're tweaking and we just have to figure out how to get rid of it. Right. And then, another one would be modified plank. And I know this sounds strange, but like doing plank on your knee, like just hands and knees plank. Right. So it's not really plank, but and we'll try this a little bit later, but when you activate, so if you gently push down into the floor and then push forward, like you're tracking forward, but you're not actually moving, and then apart, it creates this incredible space in the upper back. So we'll try that a little bit later if you guys have a mat and you want to check it out. All right. So for hip pains, again, what we're looking at is forward folds with, and again, wider stances. So even your Uttanasana, you're going to need to do like a wider stance. And then, of course, you've got the Prasarita Padottanasana, the wide-legged forward fold. And again, you can do these also, if you can't put your head below your heart, you can still do them on a chair or over the wall. But the key is to have an internal rotation at the femur heads. Because again, remember, for during pregnancy, a lot of external rotation is happening. And that's what's creating some of that pressure in that nerve. So finding, it doesn't have to be severe. It doesn't have to be like, now I'm completely pigeon-toed, you know what I mean? But internal rotation at the femur heads will help alleviate that as well. And then when you do some traction twists, when you start to move, if you're sitting and you move the legs, or even if you're supine, you're moving the legs slowly like this back and forth, that's a good one to help alleviate any of that pain. When it comes to the pelvic congestion, so that heaviness, doing hip circles in mountain pose is amazing. Definitely amazing. All right, let's see here. We have a raised hand by Kara. Why don't I have you, Kara? Hello, what's your question?
So, yeah, I haven't had time to finish watching the transition, is it transition? No, sequencing, but I'm having real trouble because what I'm trying to do is get to low leg lunge from a standing posture, and I'm trying to get to low leg lunge from warrior, or from triangle, say, and I think that I can't do it for some reason, because Michelle said that you can't twist the hips back from external rotation to internal rotation. So what I'm trying to say is, how do I get to a low leg lunge, basically? Do you know, or shall I ask Michelle?
Specifically, you mean in pregnancy?
Oh, sorry, I don't really know what the Zoom lecture is right now, but I've just sort of chimed in because I just thought someone would know what to do.
Okay, well, this is what we're talking about, is pregnancy adaptations in class.
Oh, right, okay. Well, I'm talking about like sequencing, sorry.
Yeah, so you should probably ask Michelle about that.
All right, okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, somebody else, anybody else? Oh, here we go, Mackenzie.
Hey, yeah, so this may be like further down the road. I'm not sure of like how you plan on going about things, but my pregnancies were like really bad. My last one, I actually had my tubes tied because they were like, you can't do this anymore. I ended up in the hospital having like they legit were like, no.
You should be done.
Yeah, I had to have 2 magnesium drips in the hospital to stop labor with my last one, and like they basically put me on bed rest. And so I know with that, like they tried to have me do things like while I was in bed to keep, you know, my muscle strength and things like that. So with us being kind of on the line of like not wanting to do things end up hurting people or putting us in a position where we could be liable, like is it also something to where, like you were saying, doing like the traction twist, like have them laying in the bed, like is that something that would be kind of an idea for somebody if they were stuck in bed? Because like I have friends too that I apparently collect people who are also broken like me and get pregnancies.
Welcome to being a healer.
And like, oh, I can't get out of bed and I'm pregnant. So, you know, you kind of like, well, I'm gonna maybe like tell you there are these things, but like it's up to you and your discretion if you want to do these things.
Yes, and that's of course how you always do, because again, like higher risk pregnancies and stuff like that, they're not coming to a flow class. Do you see what I'm saying? Like they're not walking into your class like usually, but you're like, well, I have friends, you know, you have friends, right, that are probably bedridden or whatnot. Yeah, so it's very gentle. And again, you always say, this is just like, you know what I mean? Like, this is just a suggestion, and it might, and again, everybody's different. So maybe it works, you keep it. If not, then don't do it. But you know, those traction twists, even like ankle rolls, you know what I'm saying? Ankle rolls and like moving the leg and internal, external, all of that stuff will be good for them. You know what I'm saying? And for that, I would say it'd be more about focusing also on their breath too. You know what I mean? Because I'm sure the anxiety are going to be anxious. Right.
And it's definitely giving them like something to do other than watch Netflix all day.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah. And so, and if they're get to be, you know, if they're on the couch, because you know, when you're bedridden, you're not necessarily just in your bed. Like you have to go up and go to the bathroom. I mean, those are extreme cases, but or you get to be on the couch. But it's like doing like one leg lift, like just, you know, extending the knee and then down, and or extending the knee and doing circles with the ankles, like all of that stuff is great. Like it's just very, very gentle stuff.
Okay, so just doing basically like the adaptations to these poses that we would give people that have like, you know, obviously the necessary like kind of easy way into the poses of like, if you're gonna lay down and just maybe sit here and do this for, you know, a few minutes and things like that are okay.
I mean, honestly, this is like a more complicated conversation than just, you know what I'm saying? Because it's like, you're not going to find that happening in a class. So we can take that, like you and I, Mackenzie, can talk about that. But you want to, you know what I'm saying, for your friends, that's not a problem, because I can give you lots of information. I just don't want to, you know, like,
sorry.
I don't want to scare anybody, being like, oh my God, these people are coming to my class.
I was like, I don't know, maybe like high risk might be like a conversation you're gonna have later, or like, is this
no, because honestly, high risk people, to be perfectly honest, they know they're high risk and they're not going to walk into your class. Do you feel like if they're going to be if they have a doula or a midwife, or you know, or even, you know, and of course you have an OBGYN, they're going to be directed to you know what I mean? If they're doing a yoga class, it's going to be specific for that. But you know what I mean? They're not going to be told.
I've actually had doulas reach out to me too and be like, do you guys know like specific things that work with that? So that's also something that.
And again, there's a whole like 85 hour certification for prenatal teachers that's separate from this. You know what I mean? We don't have it, My Vinyasa Practice, but you know what I mean? They have us all separate. Okay. Let me see another question. We become pregnant soon. That's funny. Crapshoot. So again, some of it's dharma, some of it's karma, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, I would say one of the things that if someone wants to, like they're planning to, it'd be, you know, I would say making sure that they're not, that you're not like holding all your tension in your abdominals. Do you know what I mean? And like, you need to start to soften and think about belly breathing and opening, like, you know what I mean? Moving the hips a little bit more. But you're also you have to have your diet as well as, you know, lower stress as well, because if you have very high stress, doesn't, you know, so there's a lot of other issues that are going to happen when it comes to like, you know, wanting to become pregnant. So this is not this class because that's another conversation. But I thought it was funny. Autumn crapshoot. Yeah. All right. So let's see, any other questions from that one? Okay, no. All right, so the next one. So the pelvic congestion, like hip circles, right? As well as that wide-legged forward fold really helps. And also a lot of that pressure, you know, if you're using that belly band, gets alleviated if you can do the legs up the wall. Legs up the wall is one of the, if they're able to do it, or even like legs in the chair. And again, like, it's not going to be more than 3 minutes. Do you see what I'm saying? Because they're on their back. And you need to have support because they have a lot of lordosis, right? So depending on like the stages of pregnancy. And again, for some people it might not work because we have a couple of different options. But again, like legs at the wall, so good. For things like nausea, right? Reclined bound angle pose is very nice and can be very helpful in that it's all supported, of course, with, you know, the bolster, blankets, you know, supporting the hips, but because it helps to create space, right? And so any sort of like heartburn or nausea, and again, some morning sickness is literally like they have to be medicated for it. So don't think this is like, you know, oh, asana fixes everything. It's not. But it creates a little bit of space and openness, but it's still supported, and you're not on your back because you are, you know, at an angle. And you can also do in that posture, which helps with the nausea, is the Shitali or Sitkari breath. So that's the cooling breath. So that's either, and again, it's genetics if you're doing Shitali or Sitkari. Shitali is, or Shitali, I should say, Shitali and Sitkari. Shitali is when you get to roll the tongue and breathe in, and then you exhale through your nostrils. But that is the one version. The other version is Sitkari, and that's if you cannot roll your tongue, and you know, if you can't, it's not, don't worry about it. That's just genetics. You do the other version, which is taking the tip of your tongue right to the back of the front of your teeth, and you inhale across your tongue. Okay, so that is very helpful also for nausea. When we're looking at sciatic pain, like sciatic discomfort and pain, one of the things that helped alleviate for me, and this is again during second pregnancy, was using being in Tadasana and using a block. So squeezing the block, again, you're gonna have a wider stance, but you're gonna have the block just above the knees, and then gently squeezing that, and grounding through the feet. That's a very nice one to help with that sciatic issue. Also, Upavishta Konasana, so wide-legged or seated wide-legged forward fold, and it, again, creating that, having the your seat elevated, but creating that slight internal rotation in the femur heads, and you don't have to fold very far, you know what I'm saying, but sitting like that and just slightly folding, very, very good as well. Let's see here. Oh, another one is, and this is, again, this is sort of, we're looking at like a little bit preventative, would be Udhita Hasta Padangustasana 1 and 2, like supine, supta. So, you know, just working that leg a little bit with the strap, you know what I mean, forward and back. Very helpful. For, oh, and another one too for a sciatic would be also side angle. So Parsva Konasana, that'll help with that side as well. And then for, if you're looking at edema, so again, this is that swelling in the upper extremities, things like wrist circles, you know, really, really good. Again, this is all part of that Hatha Yoga Pradipika has a whole like joint releasing thing in there. So wrist circles and just gentle wrist traction as well is very helpful. And then when you're in certain postures, like if you're in standing postures, have them lift and raise their arms, like just cactus arms, things like that helps drain that fluid, right? The more their arms are down here, the more they're swelling. So getting some of this opening, it doesn't have to be like, you know, I'm doing all this, just get them up a little bit, whatever comfort level they're in, but just allow for some of that. And as well as, you know, shoulder openers. So, you know, something like Supta Baddha Konasana, you can create a little bit more opening in that upper back and shoulders and having those arms up a little. You can support the wrists with blocks, and that will help also alleviate some of that pressure, all that fluid. When we're looking at lower extremities for edema, again, like ankle circles really works, legs up the wall really works. Oh my gosh, I have to tell you, when I was pregnant, this is still my first pregnancy, but towards the latter end, I helped lead a retreat vacation to Maya Tulum, and I was in my late 7th trimester, or sorry, 7th month, and so it was all like just the beginning of my 3rd trimester. There was no air conditioning. I was so hot, and again, like salt water, it's all beautiful. I just swelled up. It was like so much edema, like my little feet were like little sausages. And the only thing that like kept me was, one, like going into the cenotes that are cold water, just like beaching myself in there. And 2, legs up the wall. I would just lay on my bed, put my legs up my wall, because it was like, oh, crazy. So there's when you start seeing like you can like the strap indentations stay in your feet, not good. Get those legs off the wall. Let's see here, another one, let's see. Oh, and also, you know, and this is, again, it depends. This one depends. This is a little bit more, so those 2 are the easiest ones, is like getting your legs, like the ankle circles, and like getting your feet up. But another one is, and this, again, you take this might not work for everybody, but Vajrasana, thunderbolt pose with a block. You know, that, and that will also help with leg cramps as well. But it's like that little extra pressure can help start to move that fluid. All right, let's see here. Also with leg cramps, you can do the calf smash. And so that's always fun and torturous. And that's when you roll a blanket, just, you know, it doesn't have to be very thick, but you can just roll it just a little bit, and you put it right there, right behind your knee. And again, you can use a block to sit, but you start to sit down on that. So basically, you know, your thigh and your calf are getting kind of smushed together, but you've got that blanket that kind of adds that extra pressure, and that helps alleviate some cramping in the legs. Let me look here, another one. So for fatigue, obviously, Shavasana variations, nice. Legs up the wall, Supta Baddha Konasana, so a clown bound angle. But also Yoga Nidra. Yoga Nidra is very, very helpful, and it also helps with anxiety as well. So, you know, there's lots of resources. You know, there is Richard Miller, iRest, like lots of resources for that. So I would definitely recommend that, because, and that's also for insomnia, I would say as well. Bibi Britakarani, legs at the wall, but also doing things like Yoga Nidra. Because, you know, Yoga Nidra is amazing in that the way it puts you in the brain state, it really does help, even if you're not getting you know, the long qualities of sleep you're used to, you can get some really deep rest in a short amount of time, which, you know, again, as a parent, eventually is like gold. Sleep is gold. I didn't know that in my pre-kid years in my 20s. You know what I mean? It's like, dang. Like now it's like, if the kids are gone, I'm divorced. So me and my other partner, my new partner, it's like when the kids are not at home, it's like, ooh, we're gonna go out. Are we gonna have a date night? It's like, like, oh, it's so boring. But that's like, oh, that's where it is. But yes, also someone mentioned no yoga nidra with labor prep. Yep. You know, some of the things that you can give for labor prep too, and this is just little things that you can do, and you can do in class, and it's kind of fun, is have them work on feet stuff. So for example, it's kind of torturous, but when you, and everybody's benefits in this too. So it's not just for the pregnancy people, but if you have a pregnant person in class, it's fun. But you can have them come down to your knees, right? You're on knees and sort of sitting on your knees, but curl your toes under. So, and see how long you can stay. And a lot of my prenatal friends who are teacher friends, they're like, that's the fun one, because it's like, you know, how much suffering can you take, and then you kind of like, and then you alleviate it. But it's also good just for the soles of your feet. But man, working on some of the sort of like, you know, you're going to be like, ideally, like, would we all like to have an orgasmic birth? That would be great. Does that happen? I have never had one, right? So it's like, you're going to have to learn how to deal with pain, right? And so, or discomfort, shall we say. And so doing those little leg things, maybe we'll do some of that today too. They're super fun. All right, we have a hand raised from Ginny.
Wrong button, sorry. I was wondering what you do if you have someone who is prenatal, who has pre-existing conditions, like let's say with the edema, what if they're also someone who suffers from an autoimmune inflammatory disorder?
Okay, they probably should be in a flow class is what I would suggest for sure, because it's heating, right? And it'd be like, you need to go to a prenatal class. Again, like, you know, it's not every class is going to, and again, like, I mean, ideally you will not have people walking into your, you know, level 2 flow class that's like, well, I have, you know, edema and other pre-existing, and you should be like, okay, well, try, this is, you know, be honest, be like, this is an intense class. I will give you adaptation, but I can't control like the heat that's going to happen in the room. If you need to leave, please do not hesitate, you know, take breaks as you need. And you can give them, you know what I mean, the asana adaptations, but, you know, honestly, like the, you know, it's like, it reminds me when someone came into my class after he had sprained his wrist, and it's like, it was like fresh, like a few days ago. It's like bad sprain. Is it a full thing? And I'm like, this is a level 2 vinyasa class. Like, I know you like coming to my class, but you should go home and put that up. Like, why are you here? Like, you know what I mean? There's a moment you're like, yoga's not going to fix that. Rest, you know what I mean? like elevate, you know, things like that. So again, like always, you know, when you're the teacher in your class, please remember that you have autonomy. And if you're like, I am not qualified to teach, you know what I mean? You know, you can be forthright with them and be like, I don't think this is a good fit. I'm happy to recommend somebody else. Please, you know what I mean? Like, we'll refund your money that you paid. Like, because if you're not comfortable, don't do it. I don't want you to feel, and then because then if anything happens, you're gonna feel terrible, right? Like, oh, what did I do? Or did, you know, right? So yes, so there you go. So hopefully they're not showing up to your class.
Yeah, I was just curious because I know with certain like autoimmune disorders, you can actually, if you're too cool and you don't have some of that internal heat going on, you can actually get muscular inflammation on top of the inflammation you get in your joints already. So you
And
know.
again, pregnancy,
But that's a really good,
yeah, just,
yeah.
and when people are
Sorry.
pregnant, no worries, but when people are pregnant, you're usually hot also. So pregnancy, your metabolism, you're burning, like you are hot. I don't know if anybody remembers that or not, if they hit, for those of you who've been pregnant or not, but like one of the dumbest things that was so funny that happened in one of the studios that I worked with is that obviously this person, they were scheduling the class, didn't really understand the difference, like what happened, like with prenatal students. And it was like a prenatal class. This wasn't like a regular flow class, whatever. It's a prenatal yoga class. So you had women coming in from like first all the way to third trimester, and they scheduled it after an Ashtanga class in the same room. Okay, ladies, can anybody tell me what they're like? There's a number of things that are wrong with that. Anybody want to chime in? Everyone's like, oh my God. So one, hot, too hot, right? It's like the room is like 80 above, right? Two, the stench of sweat, right? And then also when they walk in, there's puddles. So now you've got icky sweat and tactile puddles. And it's like, nope. So that lasted 1 week. And then they shifted things around. So I tell you, like, it's like, oh, and then like, it's funny because, you know, you have a prenatal class, you can't put an Ashtanga class in there afterwards because it's freezing. And the Ashtangis are like, oh my God, like we're not, and everyone's like, use your Ujjayi breath. But again, that's torturous as well, right? So there's this huge thing that's happening. All right, so yeah, so again, usually when you're pregnant, you're running hot. So it's like, if this is the flow class, it's like, okay, this is gonna be warm, so you need to regulate. And there's gonna be a point that you will have to concede as a practitioner that I can no longer go to this class. And it's a sad and terrible day. But hopefully you've been going to prenatal classes as well, right? And that's why you encourage your students to go also to a prenatal class, because there will be eventually in the third trimester, they won't be able to come to your Vinyasa Flow level 2 or whatever you want to call, you know what I mean? Whatever it is. They're gonna need to be in a prenatal class, right? Because it's like, it's just a miserable, I mean, pregnancy is beautiful, but third trimester can be a very miserable experience. And you don't need to be trying to compete or like compare to, you know what I mean, other people that are next to you doing this Vinyasa flow that you can't do anything in, you know? So, all right, let's see. Another question? All right. Okay. Here we've got, so shortness of breath. So again, you know what I mean, this is like, it's as you get further along, as they get further along, and again, there's more and more pressure up in the diaphragm, breathing is harder, right? So one of the things that's really, really good is laterals. Okay, you don't have to do fancy laterals, but anything that's going to open up the side body and open up these side ribs and intercostal muscles. Literally, most of your lung mass anyway is in the back of your body. So you're 360 degrees. Like your lungs only, like from in the front, they don't go below sort of your nipple line, honestly, for sure. Like it's pretty high up. Your diaphragm is pretty high up. That's the first little bit. The most of those big lungs is going to be back here. So why we have all of that, those ribs in the back that are like protecting that. Now, that doesn't expand as much as we feel here, but the more we can bring our attention to this side area and open it up, the more relief they'll get with breath, okay? So again, when you're looking at, you know, second and third, doing stuff that's, you know, side angle, even just sitting and having, like doing a side stretch in this way. Ardha Chandrasana is actually a really nice posture, and as well as triangle, as long as they don't have any sacrum instability. You know, and you can using blocks, but again, the triangle and side angle, it's not about, oh, can I put my hand to the floor? No, doesn't matter. It's about, can we open up this side body? That's the whole point for them in those postures. Get it? It'll really help. Also, you know, anything that's going to open up that upper back and shoulders as well. So, you know, shoulder openers, of course, help, chest openers. And then, you know, something simple as Supta Baddha Konasana. Sometimes you know, honestly, like some of these postures you can't get enough of, Viparita Karani and Supta Baddha Konasana. So they are wonderful. Those are things that they can do. You can have them use those as as Shavasana variations even. So here's a question about, is there a lot of adapting for multiple trimesters in one class? So ideally, hopefully you would not have a multiple bunch of pregnant people coming into your regular class that are different, but that can happen. People who are in the first trimester have more option, right? More option than people in their second and third. So just sort of a brief thing. In the first trimester, when you're first, you're maybe a few weeks pregnant or whatnot, everyone's like, I've had people come and tell me that they're pregnant before they've even told, like, their family, what I mean? They're part, because, it's like they're in they want to make sure they're not going to do anything wrong. Right. And it's very sweet, and in that first trimester, you just want to make sure, hopefully they want the pregnancy to stick, ideally, if that's what they're hoping for, right? So you don't want to do any sort of really like intense twists. So a lot of bound twists, don't do that. But again, and that's more for your and their peace of mind, because honestly, and let's be real, if intense twists really aborted pregnancies, we wouldn't have, issues in this country about women's rights, like reproductive rights. So remember that babies are pretty resilient and your body is pretty much designed to, to protect it. Okay. But if anything were to happen, you don't want them associating that deep twist in your class with any sort of tragedy. Does that resonate? Okay. And the same thing is, like, if they're coming into your class and they're, first trimester, and they don't have an inversion practice. Let's say they don't know how to do headstand, and they don't know how to do shoulder stand or forearm balance or handstand. You don't teach them that. It's not their time to learn that. Okay. Nothing new. Why? Because their body will be changing exponentially every day, and stuff is shifting. So their ligaments are loosening, their balance is going to be off, the weight is going to be displaced. So that is not a time to learn something new, because you need to know in your body what it's supposed to feel like, and know, oh, it's not feeling like this anymore, I need to stop. Do you see what I'm saying? You have to have the standard imprinted in your physical structure, right? And then it's like, oh wait, now I can't be doing this anymore because it's not feeling right. Do you see what I'm saying? If they don't know that, then they might hurt themselves. Okay, so don't teach them any new inversions. But if they do have inversions, they are welcome to do inversions if they feel okay. And again, it's like, you'd be like, listen, if you put your head down and you start to walk up to your headstand and something feels off, come down. You can always try it again tomorrow, but come down, because today is not the day, and we're not in a position to, you don't need to do it. So second trimester is usually, so again, no deep twist, and they could probably, in first trimester, they could still be on their belly if it feels comfortable, if it doesn't hurt, if it feels okay. In a lot of prenatal classes or trainings, there's nothing on the belly ever. Do you see what I'm saying? And that's because they're also dealing with multiple, stages of pregnancy. So they'll never put anybody on their belly. But in your class, I would say you don't want to be doing like Dhanurasana, bow pose. I would not have them do that, obviously, because that's extra pressure on the belly. But they can lay on their belly. Do you see the difference? Especially if there's padding. So then let's see here. So second trimester, there's going to be definitely more relaxing happening, more, so they're going to be a lot more flexible. So one of the things, if you have somebody that comes into your class and they are in that second trimester and they're feeling like superwoman and they're like, I can do everything, and like, great. But I was like, but I always caution them, like, don't push your flexibility. If you are going beyond what you normally, if you notice like you're a lot more flexible and can go deeper in this pose than you normally do, don't do it. I'm like, stay reserved. and stay contained and engage instead of push through. The reason being is that ligaments, because relaxin is lovely and it lets everything soften, it literally is made to soften your pelvis. However, hormones flood your entire system, which means it's not just your pelvis ligaments that are being relaxed, it's everything. Okay, which is why they say, oh, women's feet grew in pregnancy. No, they didn't grow, they spread. Like, that's what happened. It's like the relaxin allowed the ligaments to relax, so the bones ended up going a little bit further apart. Does that make sense? Once you're done with your pregnancy, the relaxin doesn't go away. You still have it all the while you're breastfeeding. Not in the same levels, but it's still there. Okay, here's the thing. It doesn't shut off and it doesn't all go back the same. So as it tapers and it's done, what happens is that those ligaments now, if you have pushed the stretch, right, they don't go back the same way. They are now going to be overstretched a bit. Do you see what I'm saying? Which is going to cause a little bit of instability or destabilization just for the rest of your life. Welcome to pregnancy or post-pregnancy. So I don't know if any of you guys have noticed, but I mean, you know what I mean? Like, everyone's pregnancy is different, but I remember like, oh, I'm going to slip into my pre-pregnancy jeans, right? And I'm like, ooh. And then it's like, wait a minute, like, technically I'm the same weight. Why can't I can't fit them over my hips. It's like my hips sprung. Do you see, like, everything gets a little bit, I have friends who are like, they're like, my rib cage expanded. Like, I'm bigger in my rib cage. It's like, yeah, that's what happens. Like, things don't knit back all the way. It's just it's not gonna be that way. Does that make sense? Okay. So we don't push through that flexibility because we don't want them to overstretch and then not be able to, contain themselves. Yep. Wonky. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. SI. That's always the fun one. Woo! Oh, good Lord. I love you. Just love your kids. Anyway. And so with the second trimester, I obviously, please don't go, further than what you normally used to going for the rest. And if they are still, comfortable doing an inversion, right, whether it be like, and I'm not talking about legs up the wall, I'm talking about like headstand, or shoulder stand, or and actually I wouldn't even have them do shoulder stand just because there's already so much, like, the boobs going, it's not fun. So, but people like to do headstand and they'll like to do handstand. I would caution them about kicking up any sort of displacement like that. Like, they can't, not to do that. And being careful with how much of a back bend that they create. So like full wheel type of thing, not so great. The reason being is because of the relaxin. So there is so your abdominal wall, okay, you have layers of abdominals, right? And one of the more anterior abdominal walls, there is this ligament that is running down the center of it. With the relaxin is even working all there, do you see anything through that? And what happens, it's called diastasis, where literally the separation of the abdominal wall happens. And this is accentuated if you're putting pressure as a back bend on it. Do you see what I'm saying? Because there's no more, it can't go anymore. And so I have friends who, were like, well, I still want to do a full wheel. And again, this is usually first pregnancy, is I'm just me, I'm the same, I'm not different. And then what happens is like the abdominal wall ends up separating and tearing. And literally one of my friends, my good friends, great yogi, you can stick your two fingers in between her abdominals this far in. Boop, goes right through. And this is post now. This is years later. Like, do you know what I'm saying? So be cautious about that. Tell them, like, you don't want to have this. You don't want to do these deep, deep back bends. So this is like, of course, like second. And then the guy, yes, That's it, the diastasis recti. Oof. Some people have to have surgery to actually fix that, depending on how bad it is. So again, you know, we prevent this by not doing extreme back bends during second and third trimesters, please. And that even includes like sometimes, you know, camel pose, ustrasana, like staying more about being a chest opener versus I need to grab my heels type of thing. Does that resonate with everybody? All right. And then by third trimester, honestly, most people probably won't be coming to your class because it's just there's so much that's hard. But again, like just, you know, lots of props. They can't do so. And first, second, and third, all of these we want to do open twists, not closed or bound twists. So open twists means that instead of, so for example, if we're doing something like half Lord of the Fishes, right? Ardha Matsyendrasana. Instead of twisting towards the bent knee leg, you twist away from it. Does that resonate? So that means it's an open twist versus a closed. So there's space for the baby, there's space for the belly, but you still get the rotation in the spine, and you can still have that opening in the shoulders. And we'll go through some of the, we'll show those adaptations, but always open twists. Let's see, yes, the C-section, oof. My goodness. Yeah, so much fun. Let's see, all right.
As someone mentioned about SI pain, I thought I'd just ask now. My friend who's pregnant, she has SI pain on one side. Mm-hmm. She was asking, because I was doing this course, she was just asking about yoga poses that I thought she could introduce into her sequencing to help her. Do you have any recommendations for that?
Yes. So how, is she pregnant now? You said she's pregnant right now?
Yeah, second trimester.
Second trimester. Okay. You can do, if she still feels comfortable on her back, right? If she does, for like just a couple minutes, right? If she does, she's gonna want to lie in constructive rest pose, which is when you're on your back and your knees are bent and your feet, you know what I mean, are sort of hip width apart. She's gonna alternate between squeezing a block, okay? And then she releases that block, and then she takes her strap and she makes sure she puts her strap and straps her knees so that they're like, you know what I mean, the strap is around the legs and they're about hip, and then you press away. So you're pressing against the strap for a few breaths. And you alternate that a few times and then see if that helps alleviate some of that pressure in her SI.
Thanks.
And it's like, you have to start thinking, I know you guys are like 200 and some of you are 300 hour, like you have to start, sometimes the yoga poses are not what they look like. Like, it's not like the, you see in the, you know, light on yoga, like, where did you triangle? Like, no, sometimes it's like literally like we're doing adaptations and variations in very simple postures in order to alleviate pain. That's why yoga therapy is a completely different animal in a way, right? Because it's function over form. It's not about like, can you get into this posture? It's what is the purpose of that posture? What is it doing energetically? And if the purpose has nothing to do with putting your hand on the floor, then you don't have to put your hand on the floor, right? It's like, but yeah, so have her do that. Okay. Let's see here. It's regarding, I started to advise having posting her since yes. So when it comes, so when it comes to, this is now again the prenatal stuff, so posting is a little bit different, obviously. The core work will exacerbate it unless you're twisting, unless it's a slight twist in the core work. Does that make sense? So if it's just forward and back, it will actually, yes, increase it. But if you're doing stuff that's a twist-ish, it'll actually help. But for sure, like that's a different, you always want to make sure postpartum, like, again, like I mean, you got to be very gentle and cautious with yourself in postpartum. There's a lot of hormones that's happening. There's postpartum depression. There's breastfeeding or latching issues. There is just a lot. And so I know people want to like get back and get fit, but it's like, you just have to not deal with that pressure. Go to a, you know, mama and baby class after, of course, the 6 to 8 weeks. You know what I mean? Because, you know, this is, it's, you need a little, you need special, you need to take care of yourself a little bit differently. You know what I mean? You have to handle yourself with very kind hands. It's not an easy transition for anyone. And so, yes, I would definitely say, you know, you don't have to, I wouldn't be like, hey, poke you and let me see if you have this, but it's more like, hey, you know what I mean? If you have it, like you have to, yes, you have to be like, well, you're not going to do this type of core work. I'm going to have you do more of a twisting and other things like that. But yes, nice, good question. The Pilates being better than the strap for university. It depends. It depends on how big that ring is. You want it to be that it like that the knees can, like the femurs can be parallel, and then that's what you're pressing against. You don't want to be widening and pushing. Does that make sense? So the strap is nicely adjustable, and it is cloth, and you just don't have, you make sure the buckle is not on your skin. And I find this, the strap is totally doable and cheaper. Let's see. All right, it is 10:38. So let's take a little bio break, as my teacher used to call it. So let's like take about 10 minutes. Is that okay for everybody? You can, you know, hydrate, or you can go tinkle, or whatever you need to do. And then we will come back, let's say at like 10:48. So about 10 minutes. Does that sound good for everybody? All right, sweet. All right.